Okay, got it. Thank you.
Okay. Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the DuPage River Salt Creek Work Group meeting. Thank you for joining us virtually again. We have a really good meeting for you. Steve Pescitelli from the DNR is here. He's going to be talking about reconstructing waterways in our region. But first, to knock out a piece of business is the approval of the October 28th meeting minutes. And so as we've done in the past, raise of hands, I see motion by Steve Zahner and second by Dennis Stryker. So thank you. And Dina will be putting up a clickable vote here.
Just need a couple more to get at least a good percentage of our attendees voting. I know that we have some duplicates in agencies, so.
I see we have 50 attendees plus the 5 panelists, so very good attendance.
Okay, I think we're great. Thank you so much.
Okay, thanks everyone. At this point, I'll turn it over to Stephen to introduce Steve.
Yeah, I'm right in the middle of trying to do another couple of things. Okay, thanks, Dave. So yeah, I'd like to introduce our first speaker. Obviously, we had previewed that Sarah Zach would be continuing her presentation on contaminants. Unfortunately, she had a personal emergency and had to withdraw at the last moment. We're fortunate enough that Steve and I had already discussed the presentation and he had it in the can ready to go. So I'd like to thank him for really stepping in at short notice. I don't think Steve's going to need a lot of introduction. Steve is a Region 2 stream specialist. He actually does a lot of the sampling that populates the 303D list for the fish IBIs, and he's just a wealth of information on fish habitat and the distribution of fish species throughout the Northeastern Illinois. And he's been, I have to say, just a real asset to the DRSCW and just a great source of information to me personally as I've been working on these items in and around DuPage and Cook County. Also like to take this moment to thank Steve personally for putting his shoulder to the wheel over the Fullersburg Woods Dam item. He called in at when we were presenting to the Forest Preserve Board and gave the perspective from his, Steve, I don't know, we said was what, 30 years with IDNR or so?
Not quite, 26.
26 years of experience on looking at this, that he was able to both as a scientist and from empirical observations, see the possibilities for our streams and rivers by removing dams. And with that, that's what he's going to talk about today, is about the removal of dams throughout Northeastern Illinois and the impacts that they've had on our river system. And with that, Steve, I'll hand over to you. You should be able to take control of, share your screen. If you just go down to the bottom, you'll see that share screen and just hit that icon and there we go.
Let's see here. Okay. Oh, I better go back up to the top. Oh, thanks a lot, Stephen. Pleasure to be here. Back at you. Conservation Foundation has been a great partner over the years in our dam removal efforts and other things related to streams. I mean, it's hard to find a watershed group as active and focused as your DuPage Salt Creek Water Group, watershed group. But so what I'm going to talk about today is the dam, my favorite topic, dams and dam removal. I realize I'm talking to the choir here, and most of you have seen a lot of this before, so I have another Zoom meeting in a little while, so I'm going to go pretty fast through some of it and get toward the end where there's some new stuff maybe you haven't seen. So anyway, with that, let's get going here. I'm just going to quickly review the effects of dams. You guys all know about these, and update our progress in dam removals, fish passage and removals, excuse me, and talk about some case studies of dam removal benefits. Some of you have seen that before, and then focus a little bit more on the importance of connectivity, and talk about the Brandon and Shanahan dams a little bit, and then some future prospect comments. So this is stuff that you guys are really familiar with. There's basically the effects of dams can be put into two categories: local and system-wide. In the dam pools, we've seen just about anything you look at is affected by the dams and the dam pools. And then, of course, the dams affect migration and dispersal of fish. So you see areas that are missing species, especially in northeastern Illinois, where we've had a history of water quality problems. And this is a kind of an older dam database. I'll show you a new one later on. But this is what I saw when I first came here in 1994. And that combined with the history of water quality problems influenced my perspective, and that this has to be the thing we have to focus on, is to remove these dams. I mean, we can improve the areas upstream, as you well know, but if fish can't get back there, it doesn't do much good. So this is kind of a overview of all the dam projects. The green ones are the fish passage, the red ones are the removals. These white icons are the ones we've actually evaluated. And then there's some on here that are in the near future to be removed. So that's kind of an overview. 34 projects altogether. This Miles Reconnected is still kind of under review. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But just to kind of give you a perspective, again, I came on in 1994 and started talking about the dam removals. And, as you know, you run into a lot of opposition, both in and out of DNR. So it took a while. That first dam was Waubonsee Creek. And in fact, that was blown out by the 1996 flood, along with a few others, including Shanahan Dam. And we'll talk about that in a while too. So it took a while to get the momentum going, but we're kind of cruising along now. I want to talk real briefly about fish passage first. As you all know, if you can't remove a dam, the next best thing is to put in fish passage. And we've had a couple of these projects. They do work, but and connect for some species, but it's not a complete connection. It's often more expensive. And as we found with these two projects, which we collaborated with the Conservation Foundation, with U.S. Fish and Wildlife money, they both had to be rebuilt due to flood damage. So it works, but it's not the greatest. Of course, here's the biggest fish passage project we've had, and you're all familiar with this, the Yorkville Dam. And there's been some real problems with that, both with the Denell it's on your left, and the natural stream there, the kayak or the canoe passage. But it does work. Fish get by it. But it does, as you know, it doesn't do anything for the water quality upstream. And they're kind of ugly and take maintenance and all that stuff. So dam removals are better. I'll just kind of show you a few examples of dam removals. When you remove a dam, it restores the stream and the river's there. You don't have to do anything afterwards. That's the South Batavia Dam. Brewster Creek was one of the first ones. A lot of you are familiar with that. Jennifer, I know, was involved in this one heavily. They first wanted to armor the banks and do everything to keep the sediment going, and they decided they just let it go and see what happens, and that's what happened. The stream just found its own way, and not much sediment went downstream, and it was a really successful project, including a little dam downstream on private property, which actually turned out very nice too. And of course, you're all familiar with this one, Churchill Woods. Blackberry was a big one. We removed in 2013, gave us some really interesting results. That dam was there for about 180 years. And we were able to study that one fairly thoroughly. Used a little too much rock, for my opinion, but the fish didn't seem to mind. And of course, one of the other big projects was the Hoffman Dam. So anyway, this one kind of spurred a lot of other removals on the Displains. You know, it was a big dam, and the removal was very successful, and kind of stimulated the dam removal program with DNR, which is based largely on dam safety, because these dams, in addition to being a problem environmentally, actually kill people, and about 3 people have died at that dam. So anyway, that's another one of the issues. So we've had the opportunity, and I think some of you have seen this before, to evaluate these dam removals and how the fish respond. And this is kind of a map of the ones that we've evaluated. And of course, in Northeastern Illinois, we have the urban land cover issue. So, you know, the response to a dam removal is going to depend on the background or you know, the quality of the stream in which the dam resides. So we kind of got a gradient of urban land cover for these dam removals. This is kind of how we evaluate the dams before and after. We look at, we look at the localized effects in the dam pool, and of course evaluate the dam downstream impacts with these, you know, the lower stations. These circles are the stations the fish stations. And then, of course, we try to evaluate the system-wide effects, the species redistribution, you could say, and look at spawning runs and seasonal migrations with those stations that are farther upstream of the dam. And our criteria are basically a fish species richness, catch per unit effort, number of fish per hour, and the famous index of biotic integrity, which you're all pretty familiar with. Evaluation of the system-wide effects, we rely on basically fish species richness, but in one case, the Blackberry Creek Dam, we were able to compare the fish communities in a watershed where there was a dam for 180 years versus undammed tributaries that were right next to Blackberry Creek. So this is the results for the dam pool. You can see in each one of these cases, before and after removal, the number of species increases after removal. That's across the board. No surprise to anybody there. I think also the catch per unit effort, number of fish per hour increases. In the case of Blackberry Creek, it went through the charts. It kind of makes all the rest of them look not so good, but this is another thing that we see. The productivity in those dam pools is really low, and once you get the water flowing, the fish really respond. The IBI is a little slower to respond, but it does. We do see higher IBIs in the dam pool after removal, and all these things happen quite rapidly within the first season, actually. So if you take them all together, it's pretty convincing as far as the number of species before and after, the catch per unit effort, and the IBI. The means are all pretty different. This one is not significant for what it's worth, just because there's so much variability there. But anyway, I think it's a fairly compelling story, and kind of one of those fun things to work on where you really see the results immediately and very demonstrable, unlike a lot of things we do in this field. So the other thing, of course, that we looked at was the system-wide effects. These are the dams we kind of looked at in relation to some of the dams that are existing. So, you know, the system-wide effect can depend on what other dams are present. But immediately, this is kind of the fun part. You see fish moving back in there in Brewster Creek. We saw smallmouth come right back in, and the quillback had a big run in the following season. It's a riverine species of sucker that runs up the creek to spawn. And we also found this big flathead up there in this little 10-foot wide creek spawning in Brewster Creek a couple of years after the removal. So that's kind of fun. And in Blackberry Creek, we saw the same thing. And the dam was removed in March, and the suckers ran up in April and spawned the shorthead red horse and the quillback and smallmouth, and it's pretty fun. You can see the red horse on their nests. It's a good way to, without sampling even, to see that the fish got up there and they're actually doing their thing. So that was pretty exciting. And when we removed that dam, we were kind of thinking, how quickly are these suckers going to move back in there? And they had wasted no time at all. So to kind of quantify this in a little better, we looked at species composition in these watersheds, like I said before, in Blackberry Creek, where the dam had been in place for 180 years, and then these other sister watersheds in the Fox that are similar size and gradient and condition, a little less urbanized than Blackberry, perhaps, but these little dots are our sampling station. They're not really dots anymore, they're kind of hashtags. But anyway, this is what we found in Blackberry Creek. All these species here were missing compared to the undammed tributaries. So you can see it's pretty clear, after 180 years, you just lose species, floods, droughts, man-made perturbations, whatever. The species just kind of go away, and most of you are familiar with that phenomenon. And so far, this is the number of species that we've found that have returned. And hopefully we'll see the rest of these guys coming in. And the IBI has also improved also. I don't have that slide here. So pretty convincing. And this is a summary of all the species we've found upstream of our dam projects, the new species here, and there's a list to kind of too much information, but you get the point. And here's the data, some data that Stephen provided for me from the Churchill Woods dam removal, and same thing. The fish moved back up there. They weren't there before, and established up there, and it's again very successful and demonstrable. I'm going to switch gears here a little bit and talk about the difference. This is related to dam removal, but also the importance of connectivity in comparing the Des Plaines and DuPage watersheds using our historic data. Of course, the Channahon Dam is a impassable dam at the mouth of the DuPage, and then at the lower Des Plaines has the Channahon Dam, which is a big structure and kind of a barrier, but it is passable, and we've demonstrated that clearly over the past few years. So if you look, and this is some work done by a graduate student at the Natural History Survey, or a postdoc, I should say, Matt Altenritter. He looked at our old data and compared, these are our basin surveys from 83 to 2013 for the Des Plaines and DuPage. And so these black bars are what's below the dam, and you can see in both cases, as the lower Des Plaines in Illinois improved due to the Clean Water Act, you got more and more species. And then in the Des Plaines, the upstream samples also increased because they were coming through the Lockport Dam. So you see that increase, but in the DuPage, we've seen it kind of level out. So we're not seeing the same kind of increase in species in the DuPage River because of the impassable Channahon Dam. It was breached in 1996, as I said, in the flood, and it seems, it's pretty clear that some species moved up there And that may account, at least in part, for that increase between these two samples. And those species are kind of hanging on, and we're losing a few of the migratory ones, but it's hanging on pretty well. But we don't expect any more species. We at one time planned to have a fish passage put in there, but the Asian carp showed up, so that kind of got squashed. This is just another look at that species richness change over time between Des Plaines and DuPage. Let's see, it's quite clear, and there levels off after 1996 in the DuPage. This is DuPage River Index of Biotic Integrity. Again, so pretty variable, but you can see the downstream area. We've had an increase in IBI as we would expect, but the IBIs upstream have been fairly flat. In contrast, for the Des Plaines River, this is the results comparing 2013 to 2018 basin surveys. In the lower part of the Des Plaines River, just above the Brandon Lock, we saw increase all across 4 of these stations, which is kind of unusual. I mean, usually these basin surveys, you don't see much change, a little bit here and there, but to see something like this is rather unusual. And as it turns out, McCook Reservoir came online in 2017, and the number of combined sewer overflows decreased dramatically. In fact, I was talking to a guy at the MWRD, and he thought the system was broken because they weren't getting all the CSOs, they come up as alerts. So anyway, that made a huge difference. I mean, it's, as much progress as we've made in water quality, there's still room for improvement with the combined sewer overflows. And hopefully we'll see further improvements with the phase 2 McCook opening in 2029, which will double the capacity to 6.5 billion gallons. Another thing we saw was a kind of an explosion of smallmouth bass in 2018. The catch per unit effort went up a lot since in these 4 stations that I showed you in the lower Des Plaines there compared to 2013. And interesting part about this was these were rather, I mean, all large fish. And we didn't see any young of the year in previous years. So we're thinking again that they came up through the Brandon Lock. And in fact, we collaborated with Southern Illinois University to do some trace element work, the microchemistry. I need to get rid of this thing. Trace elements in the water incorporate into the fish hard structure. So it gives you basically a record of their environmental history. And by looking at those strontium calcium ratios across these otolith, this is the otolith, the inner ear bone that's sectioned, you can kind of see where fish originated and kind of their history, where they lived. If there's differences in the water chemistry for one, and then some species, it's clearer than others. So this was kind of the results. There's a little overlap in the water chemistry, so that's why there's a fairly large percentage of uncertain fish. But for each one of these families that we looked at, there was movement. These are the chemistry of the fish upstream of the Brandon Lock. So it pretty well demonstrates that they can get through the lock, and that's certainly the source of all the new species we've seen up in the Des Plaines River. I think there's since 82, we've had over 50 new species show up. Probably not all those came through the Brandon Lock, but a good portion of them possibly did. And of course, with the Asian carp barrier going in, we might be done with that, although we'll see how quickly this happens. But once they cut that recruitment source off, we'll be kind of stuck in time with the number of species that we have now. Which is an important thing, and Stephen has focused on this a lot. I mean, this is the IEPA threshold for full support of aquatic life use, which is based on fish. If the fish can't get there, then you stay in a degraded condition. So these are all the station, the IBI on all the stations on the Des Plaines River main stem. So you can see we've had a lot of improvement, but there's a ways to go. And in fact, it's a similar situation with the DuPage River. Down, these are most recent results, IBI results from our 2018 basin survey. Downstream of Shanahan, excellent community of fish, IBI 52. And downstream of geez, my brain's going dead. That dam, that's 45.
Woods.
Thank you. And then the IBIs decrease as you go up, and then of course Fullersburg Woods is a big impact. And
Yeah, Faywell.
Sorry, Faywell.
Yes.
Sorry.
I say that too, both F's.
Little help from my friends, but anyway, and these dams are going away, so that'll take care of that situation. And the DuPage is a little better shape than Des Plaines, and so we hope those species will move up. Ideally, someday, maybe, we'll be able to get some fish passage at Shanahan, and I've kind of tried to raise that issue again since the Asian carp are being controlled essentially in the Brandon Lock pool. I mean, not the Brandon Lock. The other one downstream of that. My damn name brain has gone away here. Anyway, if we could get fish passage there once the carp are controlled, or we realize they're not a threat to the DuPage River, which is kind of my opinion, we could get fish passage there. But that's another challenge for the future. Speaking of the future, here's a few dams that are in the near term on our list for removal, including those two we mentioned before on the DuPage, and Fullersburg Woods on Salt Creek there. That's in the book, hopefully be in the books here pretty soon. One thing I've been working on lately is updating this barrier database. I mean, this is dams and other barriers. It was actually put together by a colleague at OWR, and he kind of plotted all the barriers that he could see on from aerial photos. The white ones here are ones that kind of need to be ground truth. I've kind of looked at not all these, but most of them. And so we're kind of working on this and to trying to get a more comprehensive idea of what's left to do. And there is a lot to do. There's red icons, of course, are the ones that have been removed, and the green ones are fish passage. So that's kind of our going forward. That's work is cut out for us. I mean, obviously, we're not going to get all these dams out, but the more of them we get out, the better. And the more miles, free-flowing miles of stream that we open up, the better we'll be, and the more resilient these systems have been. So that's kind of all I have to say today. So I'd be glad to take any questions if that's possible on Zoom. I think it is.
Yep. So far, we have one question, and I might have another one for you, is Somebody was asked, Dennis Stryker has asking, do you know what groups were most involved with the removal of the Hoffman Dam?
What groups were most involved? Like, oh, well, I mean, it was funded by Army Corps and Illinois DNR. And of course, we had Cook County Forest Preserve District was on board for sure. And of course, they followed up with removing all these dams on the Des Plaines. You can see we almost got them all gone on the Des Plaines there. There's a local group, the Hoffman Dam River Rats, that were really active and trying and advocated for the dam and kind of took some heat. And of course, the city of Riverside was a very important partner in that as well.
Holly Hudson has asked, what type of structures are considered obstructions in the IDNR database?
There's some culverts and some of these in the Des Plaines especially are streams that go underground. I mean, there's some streams where they just buried them. So we considered those obstructions as well. And any structure that kind of showed up on, in the aerial photos, it looked like it could possibly be a fish barrier. Now, again, some of those need to be ground truth, and I've kind of working on that. I've looked at a few of them, but there's a fair amount of work to do, to get this totally up to speed. But it's a really good start. And in fact, he had started to compile the miles of free flowing stream and has those color coded on on the streams. So that's something I haven't really dug into yet, and would like to kind of ground truth those as well and kind of summarize the results of that and the miles that we've opened up so far.
And Kelsey has asked if you could give a status on the work on the Brandon lock.
I think, I'm not totally up to speed on that, and the most recent things, I think it's quite a few years off. And I know the current administration supports it, and they've agreed to, with the help of Michigan, to fund, the initial engineering studies. So I think it's probably going to happen, but it's going to be quite a few years. Like with any Army Corps project, it's going to take a while. And there's some opposition, of course, from the barge industry. So the longer they put that off, the better. Because essentially the Asian carp haven't moved in many, many years. They're kind of stalled out there at the I-55 bridge over the Des Plaines River. They kind of go, find a few of them up there above that, but not too many, and they just haven't moved. And of course, part of that is due to the fact that we're fishing them out using the commercial fishermen. But there's also some evidence that they don't like the water, that there's some bioactive compounds that affect their physiology. And there's some work done at the U of I that found that if they compare the fish at the leading edge to the fish way downstream, there's some compromised immunity and liver function and other things like that. So it's possible that they're susceptible to those bioactive chemicals that some of the native fish may not be. But it's an interesting story.
Holly added to her comment that watershed-based plans do usually include stream physical condition assessments that include all types of hydraulic structures. So those could be a source.
Oh, okay. Yeah, if it's, I'd like to, open this thing up and share it and get some other people involved in looking at these barriers. This is really, I think, important data or important analysis. It can kind of, eventually some of these structures are not worth going after. You know, they're lakes way up in the watershed. You wouldn't get much bang for the buck. So, you know, eventually some kind of prioritization is obviously one thing that could evolve from this analysis.
And I have one last question, unless we get any more, and that was, is there any work being done to evaluate natural fish passage impediments such as beaver dams?
Yeah, we've actually come across a few barriers, and they do impact the population. Beaver dams are, I don't know that I've ever seen any impact from beaver dams on species distribution. Is there, you know, fairly temporary? They might last for a few years, but eventually get blown out, and a fish can get over some of them. But there are a few natural barriers in the Kankakee Basin on Prairie Creek. Right near the mouth, there's a rock shelf, and we see some species missing upstream of that. And there's also a big waterfall, natural rock formation on Rock Creek in the Kankakee River. And we do see some impact from that natural barrier on the species assemblage upstream. So there's a few of them out there, and they have, you know, essentially the same impact as a dam.
Steve, I had a question about the Shawnahan Dam. As you were showing that, you know, we see very good scores for IBI out in the Des Plaines River, and then in the mouth of the the DuPage River, and then we hit that dam, and they, you know, a lot of those species fall out. You and I had talked a few years ago when we were looking at the Faywell Dam about the possibility of doing a stocking program with native species, and at that point, senior staff at IDNR had really not been keen on that idea because obviously some issues with the Asian carp, etc., and it was not entertained. Do you know if there's been any move at all on being more, you know, the state being more friendly to a program like that? Obviously, one of the ways around the Shawnahan would be to do a stocking program with the native species that are eliminated by the dam.
Yeah, that's a good question. And actually, we have looked at that quite intensively as a mitigation for Brandon Lock. And then, of course, whatever kind of program we came up with for the Des Plaines could be applied to the DuPage. We went through a whole, boy, I bet it was a whole year of negotiation with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service on a mitigation program for the Brandon Lock. You know, listing the species and trying to come up with a plan to mitigate. One thing DNR is not on board with is moving adults. Say, like, you know, grabbing a bunch of shorthead red horse and throwing them upstream of Brandon over a number of years. I mean, it could be a good approach. I mean, but the risk involved with that are too high as far as, you know, bringing other species along or disease or whatever. So the plan was actually to raise non-native fish in the hatcheries and then stock them, you know, as fingerlings or juveniles. And in fact, in a big watershed like Des Plaines or DuPage, you could produce a lot more fish. I mean, the survival is not going to be as big, but then you eliminate, you know, you can quarantine the fish, you can eliminate any hazards of transferring unwanted organisms or diseases. And so that kind of went down that pathway, came up with a program and a cost, and it kind of got shot down. It was Fish and Wildlife Service was kind of on board, but the Army Corps said, we don't mitigate like that.
They have any solutions for how to mitigate otherwise?
It was about, you know, I think it's almost, what is it, a $760 million project. And we came up with a figure about $2 million a year to do that. And it's gotten basically nowhere. In fact, honestly, I've been kind of really frustrated by that whole thing because, you know, every every week, or it slowed down a little bit, but there for a while, there was a newspaper article on the Brandon Lock, and it never mentioned the impacts on the native community. Not that we expect them not to put it in because of impacts on the DuPage River, displays river, but at least we could acknowledge that. And there's been some kind of difficulty in getting that done. So it's,
Yeah, it sometimes strikes me as a little bit of a scorched earth policy. You know, it's like, well, you know, German army invading Russia will just burn all the crops and everyone will starve.
yeah. So it's, anyway.
Well, we're running up against your time barrier to
Okay.
get the presentation.
Thank you very much, Steve. We appreciate your time. Steve and I were co-workers at the DNR back 25
That's
years
right.
ago and talked about dams then, and you educated this young engineer at the time a lot. And I think that we're making progress. so many
Definitely.
years later.
I have one last question that came in real fast. Is Steve, how do people contact you?
You guys have my email, right?
Yep.
Yeah, we can supply it out to members. And Steve, I had a couple of requests if people could get hold of your presentation. So would that be?
Yeah, sure.
Yep. So I'll be in contact with you later, and Dina will send out Steve's contact information along with that.
And
Okay, I can send.
recorded this so we can put the presentation up on the website. So people who want to watch it or share it can do that.
Okay, I was gonna say I could send you the slides and you can put it on your website if you'd like.
Perfect.
Okay,
Okay.
Thank you, Steve.
Thanks,
thanks a
Steve.
lot. Great working with you.
And you. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Okay, now we have a presentation about pet waste campaign.
Yeah,
with Jennifer Hamer.
Dave, I had just one thing to say. Steve had talked about when we were talking about fish stocking, and he had talked about stocking non-native fish. Just to be clear, he wasn't talking about non-native species. He was talking about non-native individuals, meaning they weren't native to that particular watershed. So just wanted to make sure there was no confusion on that point. Okay, so our next presenter is needs no introduction, Jen Hammer. She's on the board of the DRSCW and also provides staff to the Lower DuPage work group and the Lower Des Plaines work group. And she is staff with the Conservation Foundation. And she is going to talk about a recently awarded grant that can help members with their MS4 program, specifically fecal I nearly said fecal chlorides on the mind. Okay, Jen, thanks for talking to us today.
Yeah, no problem. So just be a couple quick slides. So yeah, we received a grant earlier this year from the Illinois American Water Environmental Grant Program, really just to focus on a social media campaign for picking up pet waste, and to go along with that, signs and dispensers, trying to get over some of the potential barriers out there for communities or park districts. So we put together a program, and then so the Conservation Foundation got the grant, but we're working through our watershed group partners. As Stephen said, the Lower DuPage, Lower Des Plaines, as well as DRCW, and working with those communities who are already engaged in these water quality issues. And then as part of that too, so like Stephen said, it helps on the MS4 side of things with public engagement, involvement. Fecal coliform is a problem kind of all over the place, but it also actually addresses one of the items within the TMDL, one of the suggested best management practices of doing education and outreach, so we can address the TMDL as well. And so pretty simply, the next slide here. I just got our signs in on Friday, so we actually have them in-house, as well as these dispenser stations. So what we're offering to communities or park districts would be to start out with 2 aluminum signs, 12 by 18 inches. They mount normally, the holes are spaced out so they can mount on a normal signpost, and then a single dispenser, as well as a couple of boxes of bags to get you started. We will have additional signs available for $25 a piece. And the place that we got them from, ordering them is pretty straightforward. So we have some extra, but then we can also order them, and just kind of knowing where people's budgets are at different times of the year, we'll have these available really throughout the year. And I think if an organization is interested and is interested in ordering 20 or more of them, we can also customize them as far as kind of adding a logo to the bottom. And so if people are interested in that, they can let me know. And then basically what we're asking for in return is you to provide a post and install it. It could be a new post, it could be an existing post, but to install the dispenser and the sign, and then send us a picture. And then also to participate in a social media campaign, both kind of now in the winter as we're getting signs and things up, but then also again in the spring of next year. And Leah Rodberry on our staff has, well, she designed the sign, which we're pretty excited about doing internally, but then she's also put together social media materials. So we have a series of posts, so the social media graphics themselves that can be used on Facebook or Instagram, or however else your organization communicates with folks. We have a few blog posts that can be attached to them. And then we also have messages and images. So if you wanted to create your own social media pieces, or if you want to be creative and take it even beyond that, use your own graphics, but utilizing our posts. And she has all the information up. We'll have a web link that we'll provide to our partners that has all of those materials, has the messages, has information about how we'd like to see the campaigns done. So like a 4-week campaign, that you're picking a day of focus, that maybe every Friday that you're posting something over a 4-week period. And then since we're all kind of starting at a little bit different point, we'll get that done now. But in May, we would like to have everybody who participates in the program to participate in a campaign in May all at the same time. So we can really try and get a bigger push through social media in May, May being kind of water quality month. So we'll have all those materials available. Basically, if you just want to reach out to me, let me know you're interested, and then we'll work on getting the materials to you or coordinating for you to come down to the foundation to pick them up. And then if you're interested in additional signs as well, you can let me know. And that's pretty much all I have. Pretty straightforward. We're excited about getting these out to folks. So please reach out to me if your organization is interested. And that's all I got.
We did have one sort of question looking for some input and how they might respond to a certain feedback that they have received. And the feedback is, it's long, so bear with me. My thought is that people who do not pick up after their dogs are not ignorant of why they should do it. They're just rude and inconsiderate. A sign isn't going to change that. It's analogous to children at play signs people request on residential streets, thinking this sign will make people slow down. People who are inclined to speed through a residential neighborhood are going to do it whether there is a sign or not. So have you guys given any thought to how to go beyond this, just putting up signs and hopefully looking for compliance, but how do you change some of these, actual attitudes and behavior to people who are just rude and inconsiderate?
I don't have an answer.
Yeah, well, I actually based on a little bit of experience, and I was enjoying, Greg wrote that up nearly nicely. So, and it really encapsulates that thought. But I have confronted a couple of people, and I'm not suggesting you necessarily confront people doing this, but a couple of times it was just so egregious. And actually one of the things that pushed me to confront was also the fact there was a sign right there, and then I would say to the person, you can't do that. And I'd point to the sign. And, so I did feel like it stiffened my spine a little bit to, to bring it to the person's attention. And in all cases, the person did then pick it up. And, in one case, this guy was kind of like pushing it with a stick down a storm drain. So it was like, that's not what the storm drain is for. So I guess I feel.
Yeah, and that's, one of the things that we had really hoped to have done over the summer with this, and maybe it'll be something we can do next year, just kind of ran into some issues around COVID and things, but so providing the dispensers, and that was another piece of it. So is that part of the barrier? You know, either people not having bags, forgot bags, so here's the bag. In some discussions, actually, I think it was a discussion I had with Eric from DuPage Forest Preserve is, you know, where they'll have people, and I've seen this, pick up dog poop in a bag and then toss it into the woods. So that's an issue. One of the things that I'm really sort of interested to figure out to address that particular issue of, okay, now you've picked it up. Why are you, not taking that next step to get it into the trash can as part of that, not wanting to carry it. And so looking at where trash cans are actually placed on a trail system, and from my own just personal knowledge and having my own dog, we go on a walk, and if we're at the forest preserve, it's like within the first 100 feet down the trail is when she poops. And so looking at if you had the dispenser at the beginning of the trail, and to test out, if you had a trash can partway down the trail, and I know this is an issue for parks and that, and having trash cans near the road and easy to empty and things like that. But if it was, 100 feet down the trail, would that address part of that? And then you start that walk, it happens, you pick it up, and there's the trash can to take care of it. It is definitely, as we went down kind of looking at this campaign, looked at other ideas that people had, and just looking at different ways to call attention to it. There is going to be a challenge of getting past those folks who just don't care. And I think we have that across many issues, but figure if we can take step one of getting signs up, getting the dispensers out, kind of getting that message more broadly out there, and in a kind of coordinated effort across our watershed is step one. And I think we're going to look to continue to see how can we make additional steps down the road. And I know one of the things that was in the TMDL talked about, local ordinances, which I know many communities have. I don't know how much they're enforced, and it's, definitely a challenge to enforce, because do you just have somebody out there, policing people while they're walking their dogs? That's a tough one. But I mean, this is definitely something that I think I want to continue to work on and get feedback from folks and see how, maybe we can identify some of its barriers, but some of it is, I don't know how you change people's minds who are just not interested in picking up dog poop. I don't know. That's definitely something I'd definitely be interested in getting people's feedback on. And, we tried to hit on it from the aspects of impacts to water quality, impacts to human health, and just the gross factor. I mean, when you're out walking on a path, you don't want to have to be looking down on the trail to see if you're going to step in something. You want to be enjoying the scenery, looking at the birds, whatever. And so, we tried to go at it from messaging wise from all those different directions. But definitely interested in input, feedback from folks. And, this will be something that Lee and I will be working on definitely over the next year to see what kind of the next steps are.
And we had just one comment come in from Scott with the Salt Creek Watershed Network, that there are a lot of new dog owners, especially this time of year, who simply need a reminder, who don't remember their bags. You're at least taking a bite out of the problem. The ones who are lazy but have a conscience may be swayed also. True. The people who know and don't care will.
Yeah.
And Greg followed up that if this is, his comment was really a generalization, and we really do need some education. We just need some survey data to know the proportion for those that will not change. This is a problem we've encountered across every issue in every society.
Yeah. And, and maybe to Stephen's point, when there are signs up there, that it is at least something that people can point to if they're willing to bring it up with somebody that they see as, not picking up. So yeah, like I said, this is step one, and we're definitely looking to figure out how to continue to expand on it.
Yeah, and it may also be interesting, Jen, if we can think about some kind of, some sort of way to measure how successful this is in changing people's attitudes. And that's how we improve. The thing is that, and I realize that's not easy to do here, but with interventions, we can tweak and make them better by observing what they did and didn't do. So.
Yeah, I had a plan to work with an intern over the summer to do that, and that just didn't kind of work out this past summer. But I definitely have some ideas, looking at counting poop prior to putting signs up, putting trash cans out. I think there's a couple different ways that I've thought about it, and so maybe next summer we can go down that road.
Okay. Yeah, I'm one of the new dog owners that Scott referred to. We got a puppy for our kids for Christmas, and was after saying that when nature calls, Jack looks eerily familiar.
Yep.
Okay.
I'm done.
Okay, so actually, we did have another point there directly to this one, which is that where he's pointing out that there actually is a residence that dumps dog waste directly over the fence into native vegetation owned by the village, and would a problem if the signs were directly to that house. And that goes, also having run a large section of or large areas of nature preserve and privately owned but public space. That is an issue, where you even have like residences who will like dump the grass clippings, dog waste, everything into the preserve. And it's like, there's one person, and it's like, a lot of this is a social contract that everyone has with each other, that you don't tread on each other's toes. But, when somebody wants to flout that, it's surprisingly hard to stop them. Yeah, which is maybe not a bad thing. We can't coerce each other so easily, but it can be.
I think some of these things, like the grass clippings or even the dog poop, people think is natural, and so why not toss it into that natural area? And so that is part of. We definitely touch on that. One of the blog articles, about the fact that dog poop really isn't natural.
No.
There's lots of things that come along with it, and I know in some of our other work that we do when we talking about nutrients and like all those excess leaves and excess grass clippings and all that, yes, it is a natural component, but when it's piled up somewhere, that causes problems. And so I think it is that kind of constant reminding people, as well as maybe enlightening a few folks along the way.
And that's directly related to a comment that Stephen missed, where someone mentioned that a lot of people pick up in the neighborhoods or when it's on trail, but when the dog goes off into the woods or into the natural area, they're not picking up. And some people are likely unaware that they can't leave it there. And so just maybe tailoring some education towards that. I just wanted to make sure that all of our comments, got recognized.
Yeah, no, that was good. I didn't see that. I just saw the last one pop up, but that is an excellent, point. And I can certainly see why people would go like, well, that one's not causing any harm.
Yeah. And that is actually one of the pieces there and one of the messages that we kind of have out there is pick it up every time, everywhere. And so kind of getting to that point of, even if it's in the woods, you still should be picking it up, because we talk about the fact that it can introduce parasites or other disease to wild populations of animals. And, that there are components in it that just truly aren't natural and shouldn't be there. And so while animals poop in the wood, that's where they do it. But your dogs, that's a different, that's introducing something that really shouldn't be there. And so that is definitely part of the, kind of the messaging of every time, everywhere.
Okay.
Thanks, Jen.
Well, thank you. And just reach out to me if your organization's interested.
All right, Stephen, you want to carry on with the special conditions?
Yeah. Okay. So quick special conditions update. Remember, so we're on item number 4 off the agenda. So we're continuing to work with our partners to get the draft language into into permits. As you know, to date, the IPA and our environmental partners have agreed to an extension of the special conditions. We are now working with US EPA, and we're preparing a implementation plan, which will go to them, which would show how it would all be done and what the funding amounts would be, etc. And that's currently under review from the negotiations team. And negotiations team is made up with the board and committee members who had negotiated the first condition, and they have been augmented with a staff from some of the agencies in the lower DuPage. To date, we have 4 signed agreements. We have them from Addison, Wooddale, Glenbard Wastewater, and Bloomingdale. And we are awaiting signed agreements from Hanover Park, Elmhurst, Carroll Stream, and Downers Grove. So once all of those written agreements are in place, the negotiation team and the board have reviewed that would be sufficient funding to move forward with the second set of projects. So that's essentially what we're waiting on at that point. Then we can talk to you at IEPA about getting some of the permits passed, and obviously US EPA is a component part of that. If you are in any of the entities that I spoke of that we're waiting the signed agreements from, I believe I've been in contact with all of you, and you have had documentation supplied, which fulfills the, we're classifying as an addendum, which is an addendum to the paperwork that you'd originally supplied for the original special conditions. But if you had any questions or you missed getting that paperwork for any reason, just take direct contact with me and I'll get it to you right away. So on top of this, then, we just have a long-running reminder in here that it is worth members checking the US EPA ECHO website. Every now and then, Dina and I get a ding from that website that something is missing from a member's. We usually get it because there was, like, well, the annual report wasn't filed or something like that, and then we have to, draw IEPA and US EPA's attention to the fact that it was filed. All of these items to date have all come back as simply administrative type errors, but obviously no member would want to have these items accumulating on their account, as it were. So it's good to just have that, just check occasionally that you don't have any violations up there. All right, moving on to item 5 then, physical project update. Going to go right to Faywell, that's bullet number 2. So a project committee have placed a draft plan back in August with DuPage County. This would be, of course, for the placement of the stainless steel sort of bridging baffle system through one of the culverts. It would be on the easternmost culvert of the system, and then it would go through the splash pad, and there's a small concrete structure near the back of that end of that splash pad where this would allow fish to enter the system and swim through it. So the manufacturers and the review team that we put together are very confident that this can actually pass fish through the system without affecting any of the gate operations. So once we get the green light from DuPage County Stormwater, then we would be immediately submitting the permits for that. And we're thinking that this, the permitting should be fairly straightforward for this. It's not affecting any of the operations of the dam. And in fact, it doesn't even take any capacity up inside the dam based on the way the dam is currently modeled inside permits. We're aiming to get that in during low flow this summer. Okay, Growy Mill. This is the Fullersburg Woods Dam project. Dina, do you want to give members a quick brief on where we are with the master planning implementation effort?
Yeah, so I mean, as you guys all know, the master plan and all those related activities were complete in September, October. We are still continuing our partner outreach, and there's still been some coverage in between those since the vote with the Forest Preserve District in October that I have listed here. Since we went through the election cycle and Representative Mizaki was reelected, I did wanted to give you a quick update on House Bill 536. You can read what the bill is, but really what it does is just creates an oversight committee for Growy Mill, the dam, the pool, and the building that would make all decisions. It doesn't specify who that membership really is, but it, besides that, the historical folks would have representation on that. As of December 1st, the bill still has no co-sponsors at this time. It obviously was not called in the veto session, but it has been assigned to the Rules Committee. I believe that since where we are with the session, this would have to come back, in the spring, and we'll continue to track it and let you guys know if there's any action on it, or if there's any requests that we have from you guys to help with the, stopping, the voting no on this bill if it ever comes to that. Pre-project monitoring has been finished. And really the main thing we've been working on is the second phase of this project, which would be the finalization of that design that came out of the master plan, as well as getting the preparation of contract bid documents. We did an SOI process at the end of October. We had 6 SOIs were received and reviewed by the executive board. This is being done at the executive board level. We had 3 shortlisted firms, AECOM, ERA, and Hay & Associates. And right now, those folks are working on a proposal that's due to us on December 11th. And we have interviews scheduled for next week. We have 2 on Tuesday, and I think 1 on Wednesday is how it's set up. I'm here today to sort of ask you guys as the general, because we don't meet again until February, I really need to get this contract in place and get my consultant working on it once the executive board does go through the selection process and identify a contractor. So I have an ask in here for a motion and a second to give the authorization of the executive board to enter into a contract not to exceed our budgeted amount, which is $250,000 for the final design and preparation of the contract bid documents for the work I described above. You guys will get an update on who was selected and what that final contract looks like at that February meeting, but we really don't have the time to wait till February to do all these approvals. So we're sort of asking for you guys to give the executive board the authority to move forward with that budgeted amount.
Yeah, and just to be clear, this is a budgeted amount. It was in the budget from the get-go. We're simply asking board authorization to draw on the funds that were budgeted to implement this second phase of the design.
Okay, so entertain a motion to that effect from Steve Zahner has raised his hand. If there's a second, have that from Dennis Stryker.
I will launch a poll. Hold on 1 second. Okay.
So as Dina said, this is a contract that's being handled by the executive board, and interviews will be conducted soon, and your board will be making the selection of the contractor.
Okay, it looks like the motion passed with 4 abstentions.
All right, thank you, everyone.
So I will finish this and pass it over to Stephen to talk about the raceway since he handled that. But in terms of those final construction, the construction of the project, we are still in negotiations with MWRD to see if we can use their public bidding process to bid and manage that project. We'll keep you posted on how those discussions go, but it's looking like we're going to be making progress that way. Stephen, do you want to talk about the raceway?
Yep. So when we were in the process of reviewing putting together the proposal for the Forest Preserve Board, one of the things that we did was that we there was a lot of debris. This is mud, silt, leaf litter, and tree limbs, etc., in the raceway and down and around the wheel area. We were trying to review if it was possible to push the wheel using pumped water through the system, but we didn't have enough information on what the cross sections and the wheel, etc. And the wheel at that point was difficult to force around because of the amount of debris. So we signed a contract with County Public Works to use one of their vector trucks to clean out the raceway and use their staff. The board had authorized up to $10,000 to do that. The final bill came in at $10,292. So that's why it is going to the general membership today to authorize payment of that, as that is above the board's authorization limit of $10,000. The final conclusions from that was it was going to take an enormous amount of water to push the wheel around, given how far the wheel is displaced off the bottom of that raceway. There may be some ways to raise the raceway level, but it did allow us to control the expectations in what we proposed to the Forest Preserve board. We were originally thinking something more elaborate, but that seems like that is going to be both physically and cost prohibitive to do what our initial estimations were. So this work was critical in being able to accurately portray what we think is possible at the site. So we're looking for a motion for the authorization of the executive board to pay County Public Works $10,292 for work performed in cleaning out the raceway at the site.
Okay, and Steve Zahner making the motion and Jen Hammer with the second.
You should see a poll.
And for those of you that were following the whole drama of the Forestburg Woods vote at the Forest Preserve, this was a big issue to investigate, and the work group is dedicated certainly to working out a solution to getting the mill wheel to turn.
Yeah, I should also add, county staff did a really great job. In fact, several of the museum folks noticed things about the raceway that they had never seen before because of they did such a thorough job in cleaning it.
And similarly, the motion passed with 4 abstentions.
All right, thank you.
Okay, just I'll run down through these remaining items, Dina. So we did a second year of pre-project sampling at the site. So this is the intensive sampling that we did also.
That's on here twice.
It is?
Yeah, we are. I covered that above.
Well, it's twice as important. Yeah. And obviously, yeah, the advantage there is that we have a clear understanding of what the IBIs at various locations and QHEIs at various locations throughout the project site is prior to the work. So that allows us then to generate a sort of marginal improvement type analysis post-project, and we can see how the biology has responded there. It's of course necessary for our reporting, but it's also necessary for us in terms of learning how well we're doing. And every time these projects are done, including Springbrook, which we're looking at below here, you know, these projects inform us and our partners better and better every time about how we can do better in the future with these types of projects. And I'm not going to talk a lot about Springbrook. We had a great presentation on it on the last meeting, which covered it in a lot of detail, but that project is, for all intents and purposes, complete. And we will be moving into the project, post-project sampling in that project in 2021. On physical projects, we are in the process of working with some members about the West Branch project. They'll be putting together a proposal for a project to the projects committee, and working with a member on generating that, and it would include member funds and also collaborating with some other partners in terms of getting the project in place. And we have a lower East Branch. We have an SOI, which will also be going to the projects committee for approval in the next couple of weeks. Okay, nutrient implementation plan. Dina, do you want to take us through this?
Yeah, so as of right now, there's still no update on the nutrient science advisory report that sort of had this recommendation for standards. I actually sat through a webinar yesterday that IWEA did on standards development. And when Scott Swaite from the IEPA talked about upcoming nutrient standards, he focused on the three-party agreement and the process that's already in place, and the NSAC recommendations were not brought up. So it doesn't look like, at least at this time, the IEPA is looking at propagating standards through the Pollution Control Board for those. So we're going to be looking at nutrient implementation being done through the major permits and possibly some minors with expansions using that third-party agreement. There was a nutrient loss reduction strategy virtual partner meeting in early November that sort of just focused on the update. As you guys know, we had the original nutrient reduction strategy that's focused on the Gulf hypoxia and the big picture Mississippi loading into the Gulf. Each 2 years, they do put out an update to that. So the update was released last year, which means this is the planning year. This is the planning year to start gathering all the data so that the next update can be prepared. It's just a never ending cycle on this with those. Just tracking implementation of the plants that have phosphorus reduction, other phosphorus reduction programs that are being done both in nitrogen for both ag and point sources and other non-point sources, MS4s. So that was just their annual update. We're head on in up with the trading analysis. As you guys we've been over this several times, that the point source of point source trading is sort of in a holding pattern. It's been finished. We've done the cost analysis, but until we sort of establish what that baseline is, what that trading level is it 0.1? Is it the 0.28 from the IPS? Is it the 0.5? Is it the 1? We really are at a holding point and can't go any further and analyzing that. So what we're done is we're now dived into the stream crediting and looking at a way to really quantify and get total credits for the types of projects the DRSCW and the Lower DuPage River Watershed Coalition, who's our partner on this, are interested in doing. And so we've been working with our trading team of Tetra Tech and Kaiser and Associates. Those are the two big ones. And what we do is now we need a model of some sort to start looking at calculating how you calculate these stream crediting credits. And we believe that there may be some feasibility of using our already developed IPS model that MBI, lots of acronyms, developed for us. And so we need to bring MBI into the trading loop. They don't have an existing contract right now for trading. They were focused on the IPS, but the IPS as it stands doesn't do what we need to do, but we believe with some tweaks and some changes, it can. So we're in the process, and hopefully we have a meeting scheduled for tomorrow to really start diving into doing this, but I need a way to compensate MBI for their time. And I've sort of, we're still phasing out the scope, but really the scope's going to focus on some project management, attendance with meetings with K&A, Kaiser and Associates, and Tetra Tech scientific staff to kind of come up with the questions that need to be answered and then start developing the techniques to answer those questions. And then there may be some additional work on that IPS model. And so I'm asking today for a motion and second and vote to give authorization to the executive board to enter into a contract with MBI not to exceed $20,000. I have some preliminary numbers from them. It's definitely way under that 20, but really until I have tomorrow's meeting where we start going through the basics of whether the IPS is going to work, I don't know what those next steps are. So I don't want to keep amending a contract, which is sort of why I'm asking for a little bit more than what I think it's going to cost so that I can make sure I can get that work done in that value. And it'll be a contract, with MBI that doesn't, right now, it has no changing to the Tetra Tech contract that stands as is.
Okay, if there are any questions, you can type them in, but looking for a motion to authorize up to a $20,000 contract. A motion by Amy Underwood and a second by Larry Cox.
I have a poll, sorry. Several MBI polls today. Thank you, guys. It looks like the motion has passed with 3 abstentions.
Thank you.
Other updates in the world of the nutrient implementation plan is that I did attend a very good conference from the Association of Clean Water Administrators. They have an annual nutrient trading conference. I was able to sit in on that and gave me some really good ideas and pictures of what's going on with trading across the nation. It's actually starting to have some movement. We're seeing really interesting programs being developed, especially in the agricultural based watersheds. We're still kind of lagging in the urban, which is really what we're interested in seeing, but it's interesting. The more we have going on nationwide, the easier it becomes to keep developing programs, right? If you remember last year at this time, there was some US EPA National Water Quality Trading Policy publication where they were looking for input on how they're setting baselines, how they're looking at trading, looking at all ways to make it more financially feasible for permit holders to utilize trading. We're supposed to be seeing the results of that any day now. The EPA once again will post that, and this will be posted as not just an ask for like general input, but it'll be a new set of guidelines, and then those guidelines will be posted for 90 to 120 days for public comment, and then once that is over, it would become policy of the agency. I don't know what will happen with trading with the administration change. The current administration has really pushed trading a lot farther than past administrations where it really wasn't discussed. But I'm hoping that since they've gotten to this point, and I think that everyone on both sides of the party line would see that these changes are very beneficial and these discussions do need to happen, that the policy will keep coming up. But I have a feeling that a couple of the people who are pushing this in the agency level may not have jobs come January. So it'll be interesting to see, and hopefully that since we do have all this moving forward, that it'll be happening, that we'll keep seeing this momentum, because it's beneficial to all permit holders, both here in the DRICW as well as nationwide, to really start seeing some movement, because trading does have the ability to be a great program and a great option if the right flexibility and precautions are built in. Other things in the trading, there's been once again no update on the IWEA NARP workshop because of COVID. They have held a few online workshops. They did have a NARP focus workshop last month that kind of set out sort of the basics of what NARPs are for some of the other permit holders. Some of the permit holders who haven't been dealing with this for a couple of years, but are starting to see that in their permits. We have the Qual 2 model updates. The Qual 2 models are going great. The order that we're going in is the East Branch is calibrated and been validated. Salt Creek has now been calibrated. The validation is in process. Next is the Lower DuPage. And then finally in the new year, we will start the what is that model called? The West Branch.
West Branch, yeah.
So the reason why the West Branch is being done last is because it was the bioassessment year for this year. So that's where we are with that. So we have so we're moving great progress, and then we'll be coming back after the new year with the projects committee that we really need to start diving into scenarios. We're getting ready to be able to play with these models and see what they can do for us, and start making those using the models to help predict future projects, as well as develop our NIP, or as I've been asked, what is a NIP or NARP? The NIP is a nutrient implementation plan. The acronym NARP is nutrient assessment and reduction plan. They are the same thing. The older permits called it a NIP. It evolved through the third-party negotiations to be called a NARP, but they are this, and we're looking at it as they are the same type of document. So there are plans that are set out to look at inputs of nutrients to remove the algae and aquatic plant narrative violations, as well as geo violations in our surface waters and streams. And they are set out to identify all the sources and identify solutions and a schedule to implement those solutions.
Yeah, and just given the origin of the question, yeah, they concern both obviously wastewater treatment facilities, but there also has to be a non-point source elements. So it's supposed to be a holistic solution, not just focused on the end of pipe at the wastewater treatment facilities.
Hold on, there's one more question. Let me turn that box up. Larry's asked, how do the Qual 2 models relate to the IPS? They are separate, but they serve sort of a similar purpose. Some of the things that are recommended in the IPS could then be inputted into, for example, the benchmark of the 0.28 milligrams per liter of phosphorus could then be run as a scenario within the IPS, or within the Qual 2 model, within the Qual 2 model, to look at what that water chemistry output would actually be on DO, like specifically on dissolved oxygen. We could also change we can take an IPS project such as narrowing a stream, adding substrate, pools and ripples, and change a section of the Qual 2 model to actually see what that specific project would have an impact mainly on that DO. So they are separate models. They are not related together, but you can use one to help get a better picture of what that's doing. We know from our experience that the projects that are recommended by the IPS have a very direct input on aquatic life and on with the fish and the bug scores, as well as with the habitat scores. But how does that translate into something such as our DO impairment and getting more compliance with that DO standard? It also looks a little bit more at algae, which helps kind of maybe get a handle on some of those narratives. Since we don't have a number for algae, we use the narrative standard for algae and plants. It would give us a way to sort of see what the impacts of the outcomes from the IPS would actually have in stream on some of those ticket items that are being called out specifically in our permits as things that we're charged with. Stephen, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah. You know, it's a good question, but it's actually something Dean and I have discussed a lot. Is that we want to make sure that these are all moving in the same direction. Historically, our qual models and our so we say our bioassessment outputs have actually really had heavy agreement, and this was caused by by the dams. So those dams create such a distortion in biology and water quality that they all overlaid very nicely. So I'd always been thinking, well, that's not going to continue once these dams are removed. We're going to see these two things diverge. But I'm no longer so sure about that. I think that we may see possibly more agreement between the focused biological attainment type outputs from IPS and some of these qual models. It's going to be very interesting to see how much they agree on where the problems are. As Dina pointed out, they're not answering the same question, but I'm actually more and more thinking that we'll see more overlap between them in terms of their recommendations than perhaps from a sheer dissolved oxygen improvement or biological attainment type point of view than perhaps previewed. And of course, as Dina pointed out, the main thing is the qual will not be answering. The IPS says, we should look at this and this and this. The IPS or the qual model will be able to say, well, how much of it should you have to do? And what's the effects of that kind of item on the various water quality, notably DO. Okay, so the other component then of NARPs, NIPs, and all those work items is the non-point source wash-off model. As you know, what we're doing is largely focused on leaf litter, and this is due to the empirical evidence generated in Wisconsin that showed that the vast majority of phosphorus in stormwater runoff was coming from leaf litter. We have been working with V3. They had given us pro bono GIS services to use a lot of the information that we had in the IPS and also some high resolution canopy data and overlay that into a GIS database for this particular project. That has been completed. The next step then is to gather information of local leaf litter and road sweeping practices throughout the areas of the watershed that lay in DuPage and Cook counties. That is currently being developed by staff and it'll be going to the projects committee for review. Obviously, we're going to want all members to fill that information in to the best. And obviously, we'll probably be tweaking some of those questions a little bit to make sure we get that information. But that information then would be integrated over the top of the predicted loading coming out of the GIS model. And then we would hopefully come out with some sort of prediction of how much phosphorus is ending up in various communities' stormwater. And there's, based on the Wisconsin data, there's various kinds of practices that have been shown to be more optimal in terms of reducing that phosphorus runoff. And at that point, then we would have to think about, well, at least producing some recommendations on how perhaps we can use that mapping and BMP mapping exercise to come out with some recommendations, particularly in those tributaries or parts of the watershed that are not affected by wastewater treatment plant loading. Dina, did you have anything else on that item that I didn't cover?
Nope, all good.
Yeah, the projects committee, as you can see, we'll be getting that information again. So just taking this moment to point out, the projects committee is dealing with a lot of items here. You can see these physical projects and then all of this NIP, NARP items. we're going to have to think about, do all those items fit together comfortably? Or are we going to, is there some sense that some folks may be more interested in the modeling as opposed to the, the ripping out of concrete? But good that we have all these items in the hopper, even if they're demanding various kinds of skill sets. Expanded DO program. So this is the program that we're using to populate the model, the qual models that we talked about earlier. This includes collection of information on benthic algae, high resolution DO data. This is on top of the dissolved oxygen, long-running dissolved oxygen program. And it's really meant to tie together all those components that can lead to dissolved oxygen or high algal growth in various parts of the stream. And it's a big staff effort to get that all pulled together. It will be moving into Salt Creek in 2021, which is obviously our largest single watershed. So that is going to be a interesting year for staff with a lot of field work. IPS model update. Staff are reviewing the monstrous IPS methodology and paper. We're hoping to get that finished. Obviously, we were working on it, and then Fullersburg kind of took over our lives for a while. We're back focused on it now. MBI have really improved it a lot based on our previous raft of comments and their own comments, as well as including a number of inputs from the peer review that was carried out by Kaiser and Associates for us. And just to remind members that peer review was done because there are some recommendations on ambient nutrient concentrations that come out of the IPS. And we felt if we were going to be relying on those, it would be good to have a second set of eyes run through it. That review come back favorable to the data, the amount of data involved, and the way the analysis was carried out. However, it did produce some interest or additional costs. So I'm going to bullet 3 under the IPS model update. So where this comes from is after the peer review was over, MBI went back and they integrated a number of the recommendations and comments that came out of the peer review. That took some additional time on both the project manager and the principal staff person involved in setting up the IPS and running the IPS methodology. I have worked with them on how many hours essentially that took, and I screened them and passed them by the executive board. I'm estimating it took them an additional 92 hours, which broken between the two works out as $5,588.76. I've suggested to the board that I'm recommending that they are reimbursed for that, as this was above and beyond their original scope. The board has concurred with that recommendation. So I would like to someone to make a motion and a second and a vote to authorize an additional payment of $5,588.76 to MBI to cover the additional work created by integration of the recommendations and results from the Kaiser and Associates peer review.
Okay, and on that motion, we have a first by Jen Hammer and a second by Steve Zahner.
Just take a few more. Okay, it looks like it has passed with 2 abstentions.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Moving on to, well, there's some other discussions with other parts of the IPS that are ongoing with MBI, and I'm not recommending any additional payments on those at the moment until we work out how all this integrates into the trading methodology. And then I think we also need to have a discussion about where we want to take the IPS recommendations above. At the moment, those IPS recommendations are being integrated into the new permit. They're being integrated into the trading, as Dina has already talked about. And then, of course, there is a central recommendation in there, which is very important to the development of the NARP and the next couple of decades of nutrient management in our watersheds. So I think we want to have a clear thought on that before we talk about those additional items with MBI. Springfield legislative update. So Dina and I have been going down to Springfield once or twice a year and meeting with senior staff in the water division. Obviously didn't happen this year, virtually or in person. We will be putting that on the agenda once we get this permit language closer to actually going into a permit. And there is some additional, obviously we want to give them the update on our projects. They do get the annual report, and we know from feedback that at least some of them read that report. But this in-person meeting is a good way to not just for us to talk about all the items that we're doing, but also get their feedback. I think a lot of the stuff about trading and NARPs, et cetera, because that is a developing item in their understanding as well as ours. So it was a good way to get what they're thinking at that moment on those particular items. A lot of the stuff comes out in that discussion that they may not say in a more public forum, for example. So it's more of a free-floating kind of conversation. Okay, item number 9, East Branch assessment. This is from 2019. We have talked to them the other day. There is a draft report available. The 2020 West Branch bioassessment work is complete, and they MBI is scheduled to get us the some of the core elements data from that, and that is then integrated into the members in both Cook and DuPage MS4 report that goes to DuPage County Division of Stormwater, and then also to individual members who put together their own reports in terms of helping fulfill the watershed monitoring component of the MS4. I think that additional items there under the bioassessment, Dean, we've already completed all those items. I'd like to go to the.
I think the only thing worth noting is that, after the end of this month, in a couple weeks, we'll be requesting all the DMR data from the West Branch plants. So you may want to put that on your list of things to do early in the new year. I will send an email out once, the calendar tricks January 1, but just be on the lookout for that. And we'll be looking. Yeah,
where my brain was going was, of course, that we're moving into Salt Creek, and we're going to be asking. We'll be asking that for next year. So yeah, just West Branch members. If you remember, we asked for. I think in this case it'll be 3 years of DMR data, and we obviously use that in the Bio4. We use that in the bioassessment reports. Obviously, a very important component of that when we're looking at the ambient chemistry that we can then control for the wastewater treatment plant inputs. So then the last bullet is another cost overrun from MBI. I'm again asking that we do make an additional payment to them. So this item was to do with the bioassessment. So typically what happens is their staff are on site here for 3 to 4 weeks doing, this is the biology and QHEI information that they collect. And during part of the contract is, hotel rooms are covered in the budget. However, this year they had reasonably substantial additional hotel room costs because they normally have staff double up. And this year they couldn't do that because of the COVID-19 restrictions, and part of the working arrangements had to change. I did talk to them about them at the time, and I said that once we saw how those additional costs out, we would address them. I did get details on where where what date staff had the extra charges at and how much the extra charges were by staff person and by date. And I recommended to the board that we pay those additional costs. This came to $2,241.87. And I'm recommending, the board has agreed with my assessment that these should be paid. And so I would like a motion from the general membership to, to approve payment of that additional item.
Okay, and we have a motion by Larry Cox and a second by Dennis Stryker.
And the motion has passed with 3 abstentions.
Okay, so just a note here, what will happen with this particular item is it will get added to the do not exceed for the project, and we will be billed under the normal billing for this project. So it is not a sure thing, of course, that the project will go above this amount, but it does mean that we're addressing it now in the do not exceed figure on the contract rather than dealing with it at the end of the project when there's a cost overrun. The other item, of course, is that we are chemical monitoring that accompanies this did come a little under budget. So we typically group these 2 items together. So the overall cost of the bioassessment may not actually exceed what we had budgeted, but this is just making sure that we're prepped for this possible small incremental increase in that price. I'm already started reviewing with MBI if this is going to affect the costs of the 2021 Salt Creek bioassessment. And well, I will making tweaks in the budget, which you should be getting in a couple of weeks accordingly. So then item number 10, Dina, do you want to give members the great news?
Yeah, so as you can see, as you remember, the DRSCW, actually TCF and the DRSCW, the grant will actually come through the Conservation Foundation because of some data requirements and things like that that are now tied to these 319 and 605B grants. Applied for a grant to do the Upper Salt Creek watershed-based plan. We were awarded $120,000 for this plan. So this plan will be for all of Salt Creek above the Bussy Woods Dam. So it's the headwater streams all the way through the lake into the dam. The lower Salt Creek, if you remember, from the dam down to its confluence with the Des Plaines was covered in the lower Salt Creek plan that the DuPage County CMAP and the DRSCW completed 2 or so years ago, maybe not quite that long. So this will give one complete plan. The plan for this is that the $120,000 will be used as a complete pass-through to hire a consultant to help us write that plan. So the plan will sort of fall to in being project managed by me with assistance with some field work and stuff with Alex, and then using a consultant to sort of really tie it all together. We're in contract negotiations right now for the IEPA. They're been slammed because they're also doing 319 and 605Bs all sort of at the same time. So once we do have a signed contract, we'll get an SOI together, and we're planning on running this project through the Salt Creek Committee. So we have the projects committee that meets, and we have an old existing Salt Creek Committee that Dennis Stryker is chair of. And so we're going to be reforming that committee back and running this project through them because it makes the most sense since it's not a permit project. It's an extra project looking at it focused on Salt Creek to re-bring that group back together. So if you are a member north upstream of the Bussy Woods Dam, we really appreciate your membership on that Salt Creek Committee. And as I get this grant moving, I will be in contact with you guys to sort of encourage you to join me and Dennis over there in watershed planning world. But we're excited that we got the grant, and we're excited to see where this comes and to bring some, potential project money into this part of the watershed.
And once again, I realize all these plans can get a little confusing. This type of plan is set up to allow access to 319 grants. So it's not like the flooding watershed plan or our bioassessment IPS type plan. This plan is mainly focused on stormwater, and it focuses on, you have to have this plan in place with projects in it in order to access the 319 funds. So this would allow us to cover the entire Salt Creek Basin. Yeah. So good times. Also, Dina and I are very much looking forward to training younger staff in the delights of putting together 319 watershed plans. Monitoring, fecal coliform monitoring sampling completed on the West Branch for 2020. Once again, this is an additional item that we've taken on these last few years in order to round out the monitoring of all the parameters that are necessary for the MS4 report. So we do we do this according to IEPA's protocols, and it's reported in the annual MS4 report. Do we have Mary Beth on?
Yeah, so I have two Mary Beth Falsies logged in, so I'm going to turn the mic on for one, and if it's not that one, we'll go to the other. So I apologize. So
Mary Beth?
Yep, that's me. I'm not sure why you would have I'm only on once,
Yeah,
but okay.
you show up twice in the attendee list, so.
Weird. Okay. Okay, so in regards, did you guys want to say anything or you just want me to go right into it?
Well, I think just go right into it. You can describe what it is we're looking at.
Sure. Okay, so the new ILR 40 permit will be issued, like the agenda says, sometime early next year. The current one expires February 28th. I have not seen any sort of drafts or anything yet, so we don't really know at this point what's going to change, if anything's going to change. So we're kind of waiting on that. So new NOIs will need to be submitted. DuPage County is kind of an exception to this because we do have our partnership. And so all of our permit partners have just submitted NOIs a couple months ago. So those are in. And I think this new form is kind of based on our program because they've added, some new lines about participating in other permits or other MS4's permits. And so all of our municipalities have submitted. I submitted one for the county at that time, but it was based on the previous permit. So based on what's in the new ILR 40, we may resubmit DuPage counties if there's any new requirements. So I'll be submitting that. I also haven't heard from the EPA whether they will want everybody to resubmit. I'm guessing no, because that's kind of a paperwork burden asking someone to submit, 6 months later. So I think DuPage County communities will be good, and we'll just submit a new county-wide one, kind of going over all the things we partner on and how we're going to achieve those control measures. So if you're not a DuPage County community, then you'll need to submit next year when the new permit comes out. So we'll just be keeping an eye out for that and letting everybody know as soon as we do what sort of new things we can expect.
And I would also add, Mary Beth, Dina and I are all on the IEWA Watersheds Committee, and that group also is pretty active in reviewing those the permit language and working with IEPA, who I'd say has been very open to comments and discussion on the various elements of it. Try to make sure that it doesn't, it effectively deals with the problems it's trying to deal with without placing a lot of unnecessary costs on the permit holders.
And Mary Beth, on behalf of all the MS4s, thank you. You make it so easy for us in DuPage County.
Sure, happy to help.
So yeah, so the other thing I guess to mention is if you're a member in Cook County, we'll be getting in touch with you about supplying that list of activities. If you're submitting your own one, that we will get you that list of activities to include in there. Okay, conductivity monitoring. This is the monitoring that we do at 6 locations in our watershed. So this is a headwater type area, and then in the near the mouth of the river system for conductivity that we then turn into a chloride loading calculation. And this is allowing us to track long-term, are all the BMPs we're doing for chloride management reduction, are they actually having an impact on in-stream levels? And we actually are working on a contract with Baxter and Woodman at the moment for to turn all that into loading data and look at some of the weather components of it and try to work out if we're making progress or not. Certainly we know we've reduced the amount of salt going down in the watersheds, but is that working its way through into in-stream concentrations, or well, in-stream loadings rather. It's not always so clear cut, as we've seen both with the load reduction strategy, where despite an enormous reduction in phosphorus coming out of wastewater treatment plants, we actually saw an increase in phosphorus in stream conditions. And also there's a number of street sweeping studies that have shown the capture of pollutants from road and parking lot surfaces did not translate into a lower concentration in river systems. So this is always something that we need to pay attention to and try to make sure that we're actually affecting the end outcome in the river. And so with the launching of the chlorides monitoring, we are wrapping up the warm weather continuous DO monitoring. Once again, thanks to county stormwater management for their staff help with that, and also county public works staff. Also, there's a number of municipal members help out with that. Hanover Park, Addison, Bloomingdale. Now that I've started mentioning, I'm going to miss somebody. And Elmhurst, I think I got all. And Downers Grove Sanitary District also are all helpful in that program. So chloride workshops, as you know, this year we did it differently. We did a virtual workshop, and they were very successful. We'll have to do some review about how we feel about the virtual workshop versus the in-person workshop, or if this morphs into some sort of something that we haven't really seen yet, was some kind of mix of this, or perhaps a series of smaller workshops. But we were covered in terms of implementing the TMDL and hitting MS4 reporting, and so they were seemed to be well received. They were very well attended, and of course it did allow us to control our costs somewhat in terms of that we put on workshops with other watershed entities, and that allowed us to put a single workshop on that covered the or single workshops on that covered the entire area, including out Lake, Lake County, into Cook County, etc. So a much bigger catchment area than our physical workshops typically have. So we'll be reviewing exactly how we're going to do this in the future. I also think it was a period of time when our consultant, we work with Fortin Consulting out of Minnesota on this. It was also a learning process for them. I think they had some nerves about getting into this, about how much management they were going to do, but I think that the implementation is actually somewhat has shown that they can do this more easily than they had perhaps anticipated. I also want to mention we had a series of technical briefs that we put on. These were put on by, really have to thank Jan Hammer at the Conservation Foundation for pushing this forward, as we were all in the trenches over Fullersburg. But these were very focused workshops that dealt with things such as, I think we had in there brine making, the management of your blade system, mild steel versus composite blades versus segmented blades, and also things like calibration of equipment and such. And I think we had, it says here, we had about 10 to 20 people attending every one. The advantage, of course, of these is that these are then available, that if people want to go and watch them afterwards, that they can do it. Just like to note, of course, we had a couple of members, Hanover Park especially, who have just been a real source of very good technical information and always ready to step forward to supply it. So a couple of vendors there who have been very supportive, noticing Henderson K-Tech and KX Enterprises have been supportive with sponsorships in the past of our various workshops. Fox Valley Parks Department are not a member, but they have been very active in our workshops and have really done really great things in terms of reducing the amount of salt runoff from their facilities. Okay, bullet number 2, we have I'm asking for some funds to be available out of our budget. So these are funds that are in the budget, but have not been allocated. They were in a future initiatives line in the budget. I'm asking that $3,000 of this be made available to allow us to cover the chloride reduction questionnaire that we run every year. I think after talks with our consultant on this, I mean, staff is going to be doing a lot of this, but this largely covers writing up of the report. This is more than we're going to need for this particular item, but it's just so we can get it done during this Christmas and January period and don't need to come back to members with to ask for more additional funds. We have a general services agreement with Baxter Woodman to write up this report. Though once again, I see that in terms of furnishing the report and getting collating all the replies from members. Last year we did it online. That would be the process. We'd want to do it again, though we've had a couple of issues with that, but I think we've solved them, and this is the way the questions are formulated online. Wasn't always as clear as it was on the paper version of this. But I'm asking for a motion and a vote to allow us to access the budgeted dollars of $3,000 for this particular item.
Okay, we have a motion to effect by Jen Hammer and second by Dennis Stryker. I know we're bumping up against 11 o'clock.
Yep.
I think we can step through the rest of this fairly quickly. So thanks for staying with us.
Okay, and the motion has passed with 5 abstentions.
All right, thank you.
Okay. I'm going to, Dave, in that case, I'm going to move on to the last bullet of item 13, just noting the successful collaboration between workgroup staff and MWRD on, identifying a major source of, won't say nutrient, but loading and pollution on Salt Creek and successfully getting it, well, we hope successfully getting resolved. It seems the case. We'll have to go back and check that the manifestation of that pollution has also left. And we'll be having a presentation. It was in the newsletter that went out. It's also, we'll be having a presentation from MWRD on that in the new year. Business items, invoice summary. So these are a list of invoices that are given to members so they can track what is going on. These items are all budgeted. They are approved by staff reviews and moves that they be paid. They then go to a committee chair who reviews staff's recommendation. They then go to the executive board for final approval before they're paid, but they're provided here for your information. Also attached is the financial reports. I'm not going to jump into them as we're getting pretty short on time, and there's one more item I want to bring people's attention to. But if there are any questions on any of the financial items, you can either email me or call me directly, and I'll be only too happy to talk to them about it. So Dave, the other item I'd like to note was not in the agenda, but we have a slate of officers. I'm just going to share this. Just checking that you can see it.
Yes.
So at this meeting every year, we present the slate of officers who we'll be looking to have elected at the annual meeting. We had one officer who stepped off the executive committee. That was Sergio Serafino, who is with MWRD, and he is taking over as general manager of the Stickney plant. So congratulations to Sergio. And his place will be taken by Adam Gronsky of MWRD, who currently manages the Hanover Park plant. And I've worked with Adam for years on permits items, so it's already know him pretty well, and he's going to be a great asset. Do you have anything else to add on terms of this? There's no action needed on this. This is put forward for members' information, and
Yeah, that's right. So you'll see this again at the annual meeting for a vote, but the bylaws do say that we should present it at this general membership meeting. So very glad to have everyone continue and to have Adam come on board. I think we have a great board. We take care of a lot of business outside of these meetings, but we want to keep you all informed about what we're doing.
And that is, well, everyone can, just the other items, everyone can review and read. And then if they have any questions on them, of course, they know, just contact me about any of the presentations or any of the other items that are on there.
Okay, I have an 11:01. Anything else?
I did have one small item. Let me see, I have to do a share screen here. I have been working with a group, and I mentioned this last year. I have to stop share and then pull it up again. This is a group of engineers and scientists who are local, but are born in India or have a great interest in water resources there. And they have been working night and day putting together this workshop in India. I'm going to have a flyer here. I've got so many things open, it's hard to find. But this is a this year, it's in February. It actually starts the same day as our annual meeting, but it will be in the evenings, obviously, as it is a, it's going to be a virtual seminar this year. But I will be sending out, if the board is agreeable, I will be sending out flyers on this item to, here it is. I'll be sending out flyers to members to consider any interest. I know we had some of our consultant members last year who did partake in this, actually sent some personnel out to India to speak at the conference. So I'll be sending out a more detailed information about how, if you're interested, how to get involved in this. But it's a great event. It's run by just tremendous people. And I would encourage, if you're thinking about, expanding your, as a business, if you're thinking about expanding your expertise overseas, this is a great opportunity to link up with potential clients and also get a flavor of what water resource management looks like on the other side of the world.
Terrific. Well, thanks, Stephen. Thank you all for attending. I think we're ready to entertain a motion to adjourn. Wish you all happy holidays, stay safe. And Dina, I'm unable to see the chat.
Let's see. Ooh,
There we go. Okay.
Sorry about that.
All right. We have a motion to adjourn by Amy Underwood and second by Mark Swain. So, do you have a vote?
We don't vote on that. Remember, we
Okay,
start voting.
we don't have to. So again, yes, thank you very much for your attendance. Hopefully in February, we will have some good news as a society, but wish you all the best and we'll see you then. Take care.
Okay, let me stop recording here.